Welcome to part 19 of Vegas Pro Essentials. In this video, we're going to cover color grading basics. Color grading is the creative process of altering and enhancing an image's look in terms of its color, contrast, and saturation. It's an artistic tool for creating a mood or feeling through color. Perhaps you want that cinematic or blockbuster look for your edit. The grading tools can be used for color correction in order to fix any technical color issues that may occur during a shoot. Most commonly white balancing, matching colors between shots, and dealing with exposure differences coming from different cameras. Color grading can be a deep and technical subject, but I'll only be covering the workflows and fundamental basics to get you going. Let's set up the interface to work with color grading. When you're not using the color grading tools, there is no need for them to be displayed in the interface. However, the color grading tab is always there. If you click it, you'll get access to the color grading tools. But wait a moment. This isn't the best way to work with them. When color grading in Vegas Pro, I recommend using the specially designed color correction layout. Go to the View menu, Windows Layouts, and choose Color Correction. The interface is rearranged, and now you have a dedicated environment for color grading. The grading tools are at the bottom. You have a variety of measuring scopes available on the right beneath the video preview, and the timeline is still accessible. You can still scale the various windows to make certain areas bigger or smaller. How you arrange this will of course depend on your monitor layout. Once you have set it up the way you like, you can save this workspace layout under View, Windows Layouts, Save Layout As. Let's start the color correction. In order to begin grading, everything starts with selecting an event. This is very important because the color grading tool tells you what event is currently being graded. Even if you move the timeline cursor to another event, the selection won't change unless you explicitly select another event. This shouldn't really be a problem because clicking events to select them also moves the timeline cursor. Let's start with image balancing. Normally, when filming anything, there are always loads of settings we can tweak to get an image looking a certain way. I'm talking about exposure, color balance, etc. Even trying our best, there are always situations where the camera is under or overexposed and the color balance is slightly off. Getting all the events in a section looking similar in brightness and color makes the later creative color correction way easier, especially across multiple events. Let's take this event in the timeline that has obvious issues, and we'll use this example to go through some of the technical grading techniques. To start, switch to the color wheels and let's examine some of the tools. Here are the controls for lift, gamma, gain, and offset. Each control adjusts a specific aspect of the image, and you can also use these for creative grading. A lot of this is down to practice and experimentation, but like all the other controls in Vegas Pro, a double click will reset each tool to its default value. If you want to reset the entire color grading toolset, click the Reset All button at the top right of the window. When it comes to making any technical adjustments, I like to use the measuring scopes on the right to help with making good decisions. For example, we're going to work on exposure, so let's switch to the waveform monitor. This gives us a visual representation of the dark and bright parts of your image in order to understand the exposure values. We read the scope from left to right, like the left to right on the screen. And the vertical height shows how many of those values sit in the shadows, midtones, and highlights. You'll start to get it as we adjust the image. Normally, we try to keep these values between 0 and 100, 0 being our darkest black and 100 being our brightest white. To adjust the exposure of the overall image, move the offset slider up and down. Looking at the waveform monitor, this lifts up all the shadows, midtones, and highlights equally. This is very similar to in-camera exposure. To keep track of your adjustments, I recommend using the bypass color grading button to toggle between the original and graded version of that event. This is something I use all the time. The more time you spend on the color, the more desensitized your eyes get. So without giving yourself a little reset, you can end up with a rarely exaggerated result. Next, if you want to adjust the exposure in the shadow or dark areas of your image, you move the lift slider. And to adjust the exposure in the highlights or brighter areas of your image, you adjust the gain slider. The gamma slider adjusts the exposure for everything in the middle. Think of these like a loaded plate that you're trying to balance with one hand. To add more contrast to the image, you can make the shadows darker with lift and make the highlights brighter with gain. Making small adjustments means that you still stay balanced. Likewise, to reduce contrast, bring the lift up a little and take the gain down. With a little practice, this becomes second nature. The next technical correction is white balance. For this adjustment, we'll switch to the vectorscope. This measuring tool shows the amount of color and its distribution throughout the image in the video preview. The closer things are to the center of the circle, the more desaturated the image is. And the closer towards the edge and these boxes, the more saturated they are. The absolute center is white, and we can use this to see how colors are balanced in the image. For example, this image is obviously unbalanced just by looking at it. And the vectorscope confirms this as the colors are shifted away from white. To adjust the white balance, you can manually move the color wheels to shift the colors. You can see how the color representation changes within the vectorscope. Now, to save you a lot of time, there is an automated way to balance the color. Let's reset the lift, gamma, and gain color wheels. The first step of auto-balancing the image is to plot your black color, or what we call the black point. To do this, click the Color Picker tool for lift. The picker turns into a color sample window, and hovering the cursor in the video preview will show the color and its RGB values. Now pick the color that most represents black in the image. As soon as you move the cursor, the sampled color will be pushed towards black using the lift color wheel. Now let's choose the color which represents white, or the white point of the image. Go to the gain controls and choose its color picker. The sample window appears again, and let's choose the color that should be the white in the image. Looking at the vectorscope, the colors should be more spread out and balanced across the image. Personally, I find that these automated tools are a bit heavy-handed, but can help to start the process. Don't be afraid to manually correct things afterwards, because your eyes are better than any color picker. You may also want to switch to the waveform monitor and adjust the exposure levels if certain areas are now too dark or too bright. Don't forget to toggle the bypass color grading button to see how far you've come. That completes the basics of a technical grade. You can choose to leave the grade as it is, or you can work on additional creative grading using the various tools to design a stylized look. However, if you're quite limited on time, there is an alternative to the color grading tools we've looked at. Instead, we'll use a lookup table or LUT. For example, let's select this event. Instead of going through all the color grading tools, switch to the LUT's controls. A LUT is a cheat sheet that tells Vegas Pro to transform colors from your original footage into a new set of colors. Think of all those color filters you can apply using various social media apps. It's more or less the same. Now, the camera LUT is for interpreting footage correctly from various cameras. This will be covered in another video, but not in this essential series. On the other hand, the Look LUT offers pre-made stylized looks that you can apply instantly to your events after the main color correction has been done. You can also use the arrows to rapidly navigate the looks and choose the one you want. If the look is too intense, adjust the strength to dial it down. There is also a bypass button to see a before and after with the look, and you can remove the LUT using the reset button. Finally, if you've created or purchased a look pack that you'd like to use, Vegas Pro supports cube-formatted lookup tables, which are pretty common these days and easy to load. Moving forward, we have a look on this event, and we'd like to apply the same look to a selection of events in the timeline. This is as easy as copy and paste. You select the graded event in the timeline and use the right-click menu to copy it. Next, use Shift or Control to select the events to receive the color grade. Right-click and choose to paste event attributes. The event selection receives the new grade, and you can scrub the timeline to review it. This works fine if no other effects are on the targeted events. Copying and pasting an event's attributes by default overwrites everything. However, you can be more selective when pasting attributes. I'll undo the previous operations and let's repeat the steps. Selecting the graded event, we'll copy it using the right-click menu. Next, we'll select the target events and call up the right-click menu. This time, choose to selectively paste the event attributes. In the pop-up window, tick the Video Event Effects and Effect keyframes. Click the More button. In the second pop-up window, choose a specific event and select the color grading tools. Also, disable deleting effects on the target events. Click OK to confirm each window, and the specific effect will be pasted without overwriting any other effects on the target events. Up to this point, we've been grading directly on the events and copying grades between events. There is a better method if you want to apply the same look across a whole section of the timeline. We've already used them for other things, so let's bring out adjustment events again. I'll remove the grades of these events to start fresh. To use an adjustment event, right-click and insert a new video track above the current one. Place the timeline cursor where the adjustment event will start. Right-click on the track and insert an adjustment event. The next step is totally optional. Right-click on the adjustment event and call up its properties. Let's call this Grade 1. The name appears on the adjustment event. Naming is optional, but it helps you identify the selected event in the grading tools. You can grade the footage using any of the color tools, but we'll apply another look LUT to keep things moving forward. Scrolling the timeline cursor, any events under the adjustment event have the color grade. This method is great for applying a look to a whole timeline or parts of a timeline. To extend the grade over other events, simply trim out the adjustment event, and it's done. Making any changes to the grade will affect all events underneath the adjustment event, making this workflow super efficient. And as for the titles and graphics, you would place them on a new video track at the top of the timeline, and they won't be affected by the adjustment event on the video tracks below. We've covered a ton of color grading basics and workflows, but you'll discover that there is so much more as you become more familiar with the tools. Honestly, the best way to learn these tools is through your own experimentation and building up your understanding of balance when grading. That only rarely comes with practice. In the next video, we'll step away from the video and focus on the audio. See you soon.